Welcome to Writers Not Writing. This used to be a show where I interviewed authors about the ways they procrastinated, and I'm sure we'll still have some of that. But in these times, I want to use this show to highlight artists who are using their voices to push back against fascism. Whether we're writing or not writing, we need to be defending one another. I'm Benjamin Gorman, your friendly author in exile, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer, who hitched a ride in my suitcase. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff, and Doug does his best to make me sound better. Welcome to Writers Not Writing. You're going to enjoy today's show. And if you want a little more, become a patron of my Patreon, help me keep a roof over my head, and you'll get access to an ad-free version of the show with a bonus segment with each interviewee. Okay, here we go.
If I take my time.
Hail and well met, readers and reviewers. Today's guest is Mari Ness. Mari Ness spent much of her life wandering the world and reading. This naturally trained her to do just one thing, write. Her short fiction and poetry have appeared in numerous print and online publications, including Tor, Clark's World, Lightspeed, Fireside, Apex. I mean, the biggie, Strange Horizons, Uncanny, Fantasy. Reactor.com has featured several of her essays, including On Fairy Tales, the Disney Read Watch. She was shortlisted for the Stabby Award, the Pixar Rewatch, Travels Through Fairyland. Several poems have been nominated for the Riesling Dwarf Stars and Elgin Awards. Flash fiction store Veritia was shortlisted for a Canopus Award, and her 2025 her poem Ever Noir was among the first 6 finalists for the Hugo Award for Best Poem. Mari lives in Central Florida with large trees harboring demented squirrels. Mari, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I have been very excited to ask you about this. So this is for folks who know the kind of sci-fi fantasy world, a Hugo Award is a big deal, and you have been nominated for a Hugo. How is this all coming about? And, how have you been handling it?
I have been handling it with total grace and no, that's a complete lie. I can't carry that off for any more than a second. Essentially, what happened was somebody involved with the Seattle World Con decided that this would be a great year to have a poetry Hugo. And we were thrilled. So a number of us, started chatting about it. There, we got all excited at WorldCon. We were like, yes, we have to do this. And then we found that really the poets seemed to be the only people really excited about this, and we weren't sure about how many nominations we were getting or how much we could convince other people that this is really awesome and really
It really
cool and
is.
reach people. Because one of the things that I keep saying is that as hellish as the rest of the world might be right now, or the entire world might be right now, we are continuing in an amazing golden age of speculative poetry. This is the absolute, it's miraculous. Every time I open any of these poetry archives, I just
Yeah.
get excited because 95% of it is amazing, absolutely amazing. So then this little thing called a US election came up, and people got a lot less interested in the Hugos. But I did work with other people to try to recommend poems, to get the word out, to say, hey, these are really amazing things you need to look at. And then a couple of people said, oh, you've got poems too. I said, sure, fine.
Right.
And then I realized a couple of people were getting excited, and Ever Noir was popping up on a couple of recommended lists. I'm like, okay, I can't get excited. I can't get excited. There's so many amazing poems out there. And a couple of days before Hugo nominations closed, people also emailed me and said, well, I'm voting for this poem, which is not Ever Noir. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, split the vote. I have no chance. And then I got the email.
Wow.
I was like, this is awesome. And when people say it's an honor to be nominated, really, that is where I'm at. I've looked at the list of finalists. Realistically, my chances of winning are extremely slim, but I get to be able to say, look, I'm in that group, which is my
Well,
coolness. I'm like,
and
I am in the first 6 Hugo poems, and yes, so I'm very excited about that. Uh,
I mean, yeah,
now,
that means there are 6 people in the world who can say I'm a Hugo nominated poet.
Yes.
Like, that's
And it's
amazing.
like I'm one of them, so this is very exciting. I would like, however, to make sure that we're not the only six ever nominated.
Right.
And this is where I get a little bit less excited in the sense that we got more nominations than I think I initially expected, but we didn't quite get a number of nominations from the Hugo Worldcon committee to say, oh, yes, this is definitely going forward. So what we're trying to do is get more excitement going for this so that we'll get a lot of votes and we can convince Los Angeles that yes, this is worthy of attention going forward, and we can convince the Worldcon business meeting that yes, this is a category that needs to be added permanently to the Hugos. So I'm very pleased to say that the Reddit community is on our side. So
Good.
Reddit Fantasy has agreed to talk up the poems. I'm so grateful to them because I mean, it's Reddit. This is a bunch of volunteers. They really did not have to do this for us. We're hoping to have another discussion on Blue Sky coming up in the summer regarding all of the poems, along with the poems we missed. And we are also hoping after Worldcon to have a discussion about the ones that made the long list, the ones that didn't quite make the finalists, because I have my suspicions about two of them. There were ones that I won't spoil. I really wanted to see them on the ballot. They were not mine. These are by other people. I'm like, ooh. So I'm hoping they made the long list so we can discuss them. We can discuss other things, and we can introduce people to the amazing speculative poetry that's going on,
Yeah.
because it just keeps getting better and growing. And I had no access to this as a kid, as a teenager, as
No.
starting out writing, just none. In the 90s, it started to pop up, but it was still tiny, difficult to find. The 2000s, okay, it's improving, it's out there, but it's really been in, I would say, the last 15 years where this field has exploded.
Yeah.
And there's so much. There's structured poems, if you like. Sorry, I will really blab excited.
Oh no, this is,
I'm
I
a
love
little
it.
over enthusiastic about this, and I know, yes, I'm in the field, so I'm going to be a little bit more enthusiastic. But I promise you, there are at least 75 working poets producing amazing stuff, which
Yeah.
is a miracle.
I've had three science fiction poets on the show before. I love this field.
Mhm.
When I was a teacher, I was a high school English teacher for 21 years, and one of my babies, one of my joys, I got to teach this class that was science fiction and fantasy literature. And in that class, part of my structure for it was trying to teach students about the genre of kind of speculative fiction and how broad it is. That, I included a poetry unit, and I had we read a book or a section of a book by Armin Tolentino, the first third of his one of
Mhm.
his books, which is all. I mean, it's absolutely a sci-fi story in poetry, and it is fantastic. And then we did some speculative fiction, some speculative poetry, and helping students to see this is something you can do with poetry, because so often young people, the poetry they're exposed to is children's books, and they don't think of them as poems because they read them, with the
Mhm.
separate illustrations, and so they don't know. Or like Hallmark card poetry, where it's centered, and it's AABB and that kind of thing. And if that's people's thing, I shouldn't judge Hallmark card poetry, but you can probably hear the derision in my voice. That is
Mhm.
not that's not where poetry's at. And I would say to students all the time, like, the stuff that you have been exposed to, think of it like music. If the only music you'd ever been exposed to was classical music or elevator music, which is kind of all people get until, they get a little older, they don't know what's going on in the world of poetry, which is so exciting and rich right now. So I love this. But part of the challenge that you're facing is the kind of structure of the Hugos as opposed to the nebulas. Well, both. So for folks who don't know, the nebulas are given out by members of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, SIFWA, and they have their own politics and their own structure and their own mechanism by which they do that. And then the Hugos are given away by Worldcon, which is this really challenging structure in terms of its organization because the people in charge and the way that it works changes annually. And so you're going to have to go to Seattle Worldcon and kind of lobby for this. Is that the way that's going to end up working?
Yes, and part of the problem here is that at least a couple of the finalists do not feel comfortable traveling to the United States right now,
Uh-huh.
and or are also facing financial issues. So it's kind of a, well, I also don't have the money. But the big problem is, of course, and as a side note, I do when we say I live in Central Florida, I can hear the Disney fireworks.
Ah,
So to say that the local community is somewhat concerned is an understatement, because this, uh, not to sound overly freaked, paranoid, or whatever, but international tourists help the local economy,
uh-huh.
and none of this is helping international tourism. I don't have hard numbers on Disney or anything. I only have anecdotal data, but my anecdotal data is not positive. And I do not feel that I am in any sort of position to say, hey, risk everything, come to Seattle anyway, because because I want to
Right.
see the Award for poetry continue. This is not to me one of the more convincing arguments I can make for
No,
traveling
but
to the
but this
United
is
States right now.
this is something I wanted to talk to you about because this is a perfect example of the way this kind of rise of an authoritarian regime is going to have all these downstream effects because other things which are not unimportant, they're just less existential than, hey, would you like to be thrown into a gulag for, a period of time because you came from another country? So people are going to go, I'm not going to go there to push my art. I'm not going to go there to engage in research. I'm not going to travel there to go to Disneyland. And all these consequences are not going to be kind of seen as top of mind, I think, for a lot of people, but they're going to have to be dealt with for many, many years. These things, everything else is going to be pushed off.
And they add up. And I have two examples of these. One is, prior to this year, I was in a research study at the University of Florida for multiple osteochondroma, which is a benign form of bone cancer. That is now being linked to other conditions because when I was a kid, we thought, oh, it's genetic. And we were told, oh, it's just a calcium thing. It's not. It turns out it's a protein disorder. And it
Mm,
is linked with many other conditions. Because it's very rare, this wasn't really studied until the University of Florida said, let's take a look. Because we're seeing some interesting coincidences on almost everybody that presents here to get our very unique treatment here has some form of is some form of neurodiverse.
mm.
Most of them seem to be having blood problems. Many of them seem to have all kinds of other illnesses. So let's take a look at this. So I got to join. They were doing my genetic studies, they were doing my protein studies, they were doing everything. And this program has been canceled. Now I
Right.
want to emphasize that, as I said, this is a very rare illness. It's it does cause issues. We think it's one of the reasons I have my neurological problems. So I'm not saying it's like, yay, you have it, no, you'll never have a problem, but it is not the life-threatening illness that will get headlines and whatever, which is
Headlines.
why it was
Yes.
so understudied. But at the same time, I was very excited because I got to talk to oncologists who were doing work on connecting protein variations and protein mutations on cancers and other illnesses. And I was like, this is going somewhere.
Hmm.
And it's been canceled.
And this is
So
such a perfect example because it's an example of a counterfactual. And counterfactuals are so hard to motivate people with. We can't say, hey, 2 years from now, we could have come up with a new medicine that would have made the lives of all the people who have this bone condition, healthier in so many different ways because it turns out it's not just their bones. And so this could have been this real breakthrough. And maybe it could have helped us, given us some insight into other kinds of cancers and the ways those interact. This is that, what
it's
if this had been the cure for cancer? But we will never know
we'll
what we
never
don't
know.
know.
And at the same time, it's hard to be incredibly sympathetic. To put this into an incredibly sympathetic situation because they referred me to other doctors, so my
Sure.
lymphoma is still being treated. And I should point out before everyone goes, lymphoma. No, this is a stage 0. It's lymphoma.
Right.
This is not a extremely serious thing. But I also have I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, so I'm just going to apologize in advance. But the Myelodysplastic syndrome, they sent me to a different oncologist for that. So they passed me on to treatment. I'm not going to die. This is not a huge tragedy, but it is so frustrating because I thought we were getting closer to certain
Mhm.
solutions. And we did not reach the point of proving, hey, protein variations may be linked, may be causing neurodiversity. We at
Right.
no point did anybody get there. They just said, hey, this is an interesting link. We didn't study it.
Right.
And I think you can see the tension in my
Oh,
hands. There's
yeah.
like, because again, nobody is going to die from this.
Right.
We're not, this is not going to be something where you're going to be seeing screaming headlines. I don't even know how many people were involved in this study. There couldn't have been that many because, yes, Florida has a large population and I wasn't the only person in the study, but it's not that common of an illness or of a genetic condition. So that's been very frustrating. To get this back to a science fiction note on the Hugos, we would really love it if the WorldCon business committee could and business meeting could focus on let's make the Hugo Award permanent. And very unfortunately for us, WorldCon has many bigger issues right now,
Yeah.
primarily on where can we hold WorldCon safely? How can we hold WorldCon safely? What are the future formats for WorldCons? And these are all, and then on a separate note, how can we ensure that we will not have Hugo administrators interfering
Yes.
with WorldCon nominations for political reasons? Because whatever we want to say or not say about, I should say for your view, for anybody watching this, last year the Hugos had a problem because one of the administrators decided that he did not want to offend the Chinese government, and so he made changes to the finalists, which ruined everybody's fun. And yes, obviously, I'm very excited about being a finalist and all that, and it's great professionally. But honestly, these should be fun. This should
Yeah.
be fun for everybody participating in. And when you find out, well, we changed the nomination list because we didn't want to offend the Chinese government. Suddenly, a lot of people were like, well, I'm not having fun,
Yes,
but
yes.
we want to make
For
sure this
folks
does.
who, I mean, not to go too deep into all the details of that story, but I think it's a really good thing for Americans right now to revisit because it was a story of obeying in advance. The Chinese
Mhm.
government did not say, you better not nominate R.F. Kuang's Babel. I believe that was the book that was the one that was the big
That was
debate.
one of
One of the
that was
ones
one of
which,
several.
if you have
Yeah,
not read it out there, listeners, oh my gosh, that book is an absolute triumph. But I've been pushing it on everybody. Read R.F. Kuang's Babel. So good. But a number of artists, a number of authors, or I think two or three, who were just removed from consideration, not by the Chinese government, by by the organizers of Worldcon, who were concerned that if
hmm
people who spoke out. I mean, the book speaks out very critically, not so much of, it's really more critical of colonial Europe, but it is critical of the way, the kind of global politics works. It's very political in that way. And I think there were some authors there was some speculation that some of it was about queer authors who had content that the Chinese government might not like. And it was a perfect example of what Timothy Schneider calls obeying in advance. They were censoring to try and please the regime before the regime even had an opportunity to be offended. And we are now seeing that in the United States with people self-censoring. And so, yes, that is a huge concern. Can WorldCon, can organizations, behave in a way that is ethical? And I think your point is well made, so that it stays fun, so that it
yeah.
stays fair and free and fun.
I mean, this is something that, fans are like, oh, yay, I get to nominate stuff. And it's great. The reason I love the Hugos is, I mean, yes, writers participate in it. We're fans too. There are editors voting. I'm not saying that there isn't a professional connection or there isn't a serious marketing connection, but the majority of people who are voting on this don't write. They just know what they're just readers, they're having fun. And that's, or they're just, in the case of the game category and the movie category, they're just, watching media that they like and they get very enthusiastic about it. And that's the joy. And I don't want to see that removed. It was removed by the Sad Puppies, where this, again, for people who quite correctly decided to expel this from their memories. Years back, we had a group of people who realized, hey, if you get enough people to buy memberships to Worldcon, sporting memberships, you can take over the ballot, because you do have to pay for a membership in order to vote on the Hugos, which means technically it's an award that can be bought and paid for. The problem with that approach, I will say, is that in no way is a Hugo Award worth the money for
The
the
kind of
Hugo final.
money,
It's like,
yes.
this is the dumbest way for you to invest your money, period. And I am saying that as a finalist. I mean, it is, yes, it is very cool for your ego. Don't waste your money
Right.
buying. This is a really dumb thing to do. But they did. And people were, the people that were most hurt by this were this, woman I met at a convention who had spent a lot of time very seriously thinking, which of these novels should I? She thought about it, she
Yeah.
discussed it, she got really involved. She was probably not a writer, one of the most invested fans I've
Yeah.
ever met. She was so excited, and her books didn't make the ballot because
Somebody
people
else had
decided to take
skewed
away the
it.
fun. So yeah, so I do want to emphasize that fun thing, while also recognizing that right now the Hugos have very serious concerns. So that, oh, should we have a poetry category, is not on the top of anyone's list
Right. Right.
of what should we do next. But we are trying. I am hoping to get some excitement going. I am hoping that as I roll around Worldcon, I am going ahead and splurging massively on this, so that I can roll around and get people excited about poetry. We had some excitement last year. I'd like to see more excitement, and I would like to see us recognizing all the amazing stuff out there. So,
Well, and maybe, I mean, maybe I'm being too Pollyanna and optimistic, which I've been accused of frequently in my household, but maybe people will say, because this is not the biggest crisis that is facing Worldcon, sure, let's just go for it. Can we move on?
yeah,
Wouldn't that
that
be
would be
wonderful?
lovely. Because, as I said, I am aware that this is not really going to change anybody's life. This is not, I can say from my own experience this month, this is obviously not the same as the best novel, Hugo, or, the best novel. It is really fun for us.
Yeah.
And so for a small group of people, it's really exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled, but yeah, I do intellectually understand that this is not anybody's priority. I will try to make it as much of a priority as I can, while recognizing that, hey, people have legit concerns at the moment.
Yeah. Well, and those, I mean, there is so much hitting us that is legitimate, that is, very much real in the news, that it's hard to kind of balance it all, and it's hard to kind of maintain our equilibrium. And so, well, what are some things that you've been doing in terms of, absorbing pop culture to kind of maintain your sanity right now? What's been pulling you away from stressing out?
I haven't been doing as much of that as I should, because one of the things that was going to be a distraction for me was Wolf Hall.
Oh,
The thing is it is very hard to watch either the first or second seasons without drawing the clear historical parallels.
uh-huh. Yes. For folks who
And
don't know, this is the story of the kind of, I don't want to say, I mean, it's Henry VIII and what's his name?
Thomas Cromwell.
Cromwell. And
Mhm.
the third season would have been kind of the descent into, I mean, when it got really awful
Well,
in Ireland,
it's
especially.
very, I would say that Henry VIII and our current president have a significant number of things in common. They are both obviously massive narcissists. They are very uncaring about anything that does not directly affect them. I will give Henry VIII a little bit more credit here, in the sense that he did actually write music. He did actually
Right.
build beautiful palaces. So he contributed something to our culture, along with executing a lot of people, and very much like the current president, being extremely capricious. And
Yeah.
this is one thing that I thought Wolf Hall was doing a good job of showing, was you didn't know where you stood with him.
Yep. And if the leader is not predictable, the uncertainty opens room for corruption, for danger,
Hmm.
for fear. Yeah, yeah.
And
I
that
can
is
see that that wouldn't
exactly
be comforting right now.
so I'm watching it and going, wow, I'm feeling increasingly uncomfortable. And plus, I know that many of the people in the show are getting executed and they get executed.
Right,
So that
right.
was not one of my better distractions. So my other distraction in terms of television, whatever, was Wheel of Time, which did better, and still explored a lot of the corruption that happens. I There were things I would have liked to have seen the show do differently since they're not following the books that closely anyway. So as long as you're making these changes, let's go ahead and study some of your changes a little bit more. Um, I did like that they very much upped the queer content. I was very excited about that. I know that without being spoilery, there are sections of the internet that are upset with how that was
I'm
handled.
sure. I'm sure.
Um, I
Just as
was
there will
actually
be about, sections that are upset with the casting and, like, oh my
The
gosh,
casting has been amazing.
they made
I
this main character, is played by a black actor. Oh no, this is the end of the world. Yeah, no, that's and he's excellent. And I understand. I have not seen season three yet, so I am one of those people who's subject to spoilers. But I was reading a piece that said his character really is way more developed in this third season, which is wonderful. The kind of werewolf character. So I'm excited to see
Oh,
that.
yeah, he did. I thought he was one of the weaker characters in the first couple of
Yeah,
seasons,
they
but
didn't
in
give him
the
much to
third
work with.
season, he really comes into his own. I will say with Wheel of Time, I think the strongest thing has been the casting. There is maybe one possible slightly weak person. Everybody else is outstanding, absolutely
Yep.
outstanding, and that's been the joy of watching the show. So I've been very impressed with that. And the younger cast members, I thought in the first season were kind of outacted by some of the older cast
Yes.
members. This season, they're all, particularly the actor who's playing Randall Thor, who I thought was kind of, I mean, he's
Kind of
supposed to be
wooden.
boring, so I
Right.
can. I'm like, okay, well, you've leaned into, you got that part, you've got the boring part in. They didn't give him a lot to work with because he's supposed to be boring,
Yeah.
but I also didn't think he was that great in the first couple of seasons. I think this season he did much better, and so they gave him a lot to work with. They gave Perrin, the werewolf guy, got an immense stuff.
Yes.
So there were some really, really good things there. But I did feel that, again, given the changes, there were things they could have and probably should have explored more. Partly because the cast is so good,
Yeah.
use them. Partly because I think exploring certain things, there were some questions that came up in the finale without spoiling that would not have been asked had had they taken more time to explore things earlier. Had
Yeah.
they had 10 episodes to tell this story, I think some of the fan questions just wouldn't have been there. People would have said, "Oh,
Right.
yes, I understand how that works." And instead, everybody was like, maybe not everybody, but people who had not read the books were, "I don't understand this." And it's a valid question because the show didn't go there. But also, I feel that, again, in our current environment, this show, more than the books, which are very much products of the 1990s, not necessarily in a terrible way, but products of the
Hmm.
1990s, um, 1980s, this show has the potential to really discuss corruption and power. And they began touching on that and they began looking at it, but they did not have the time. They had
Yeah.
8 episodes, and so you get this fleeting glimpse of, ooh, there's a lot that can be worked with and studied and discussed there. And then the show just moves on. So that
Yeah.
was frustrating. But that was my other,
Well,
one
and
of
it'll
my
be
other.
interesting to see if they, because we'll have a season four, as far as we know, right?
They have not yet officially said we're
Okay.
getting a season four. My guess uh, again with I have absolutely I don't know any of the production people, so I have no inside value. This is but from my knowledge of television production, season three was considerably more expensive. It is
Ah,
visibly more expensive on all levels. And I'm guessing that the slowdown is they're arguing over the budget for the next
yeah,
season
yeah, yeah,
because now you don't want to. go down in production. That was one of the
Right.
things that very much hurt the Arrowverse shows on the CW. Like, okay, they ended up going on for years anyway, but the production quality in the first couple of seasons of Arrow and Flash shot down to the point where it became a joke and in
Yeah.
some cases really difficult to watch. And that in turn created questions about the overall quality. This is going to be much worse in Wheel of Time because the third season is that was filmed on a film budget. You
Yeah.
can tell. Um, and if they cannot maintain that quality, and we're not just we're talking this on so many levels, but like the cameras that they used,
Yeah.
the filtration that they used, the CGI, the costumes, the I think they probably still have the sets around, so they may not have to spend that much more money on that, but that's a problem.
Yeah.
And then the other related problem to that, and this certainly happened with the third season, is because Amazon has been so slow to renew, the actors understandably have had to go get other jobs.
Right.
And so there have been particular cases, and again, trying to avoid spoileries, but with certain characters, particularly POC characters who were killed off because their actors said, look, I can't
Right.
wait. And they've been very open about this in social media. They're like, yes, we understand you're upset, you're distressed, you wanted to see us. However,
Yeah.
and my character didn't die in the books, but here
I
we
need to, I
are.
need to, I need to live as a
I
human in the real world in the meantime. Yeah.
and as I said, there has been no official announcement, at least as of yesterday, there was no official announcement from Amazon of yes, we are definitely getting a season 4. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because the thing that I am curious about, I'm, watching Andor right now,
Hmm.
and Andor is very much leaning into, fighting back against a fascist regime that is ascendant, and it feels incredibly timely. Now that was very much in season one. It's not like, but I wonder if the political reality will influence within the context of you've already got the text, but you've got to pick and choose, right? What themes do you hit on? And will that incline them to go even harder on the, fighting corruption and autocracy? Or do those kind of countervailing pressures of the big money that they're trying to satisfy to make a show, say, let's not make Bezos mad. Like so.
What what I find absolutely fascinating about Disney, and this is where I'm going to drop back to my old days as a completely failed history doctoral candidate, but all of that money is typically in Disney gone to themes of resistance in their films. But when you go to the parks, it's
Oh my
themes of
gosh.
conformity. And
Yep.
it is amazing because they're still using the same films that are all, oh, let us rebel against everything, fight the system, fight the whatever. And then you go to the parks, and I love the parks for various reasons. But it is amazing how much that is, no, this is a very controlled environment.
Yeah.
This is what we're going, and we're going to work on. Everybody is happy, everybody is together, everybody is whatever. In the new Epcot show, even death is a good thing. The new Epcot fireworks show is very weird. I I don't usually feel when discussing fireworks show that they need a spoiler warning, but the new Epcot one caught me off guard because it's doing the usual happy music, fireworks, everything, and then suddenly there's a death sequence, and the
Oh
person
my
behind me when
gosh.
I first saw the show was like, there's a death sequence at an Epcot fireworks show,
Right.
and the audience is just stunned, and then it didn't really recover from that. I believe they are going to be changing this show.
Yeah, yeah.
They
So somebody got a little artistic and somebody's going to get fired.
Yeah, and it's just not. We all had memories of the last show, which was, well, actually it was a couple of shows before that, but where it ended on this yay, loud, bang, unite, happy, everything's great. And then we have this show where we die, but it's great. The fireworks will still go off, and it's a very
That is wild.
it's wild. So I feel like one of the things that this suggests is there's a lot of different
Mhm.
opposing viewpoints in Disney. That so I don't necessarily know that they always have an overall vision. I think Bob Iger
Sure.
to an extent did, but not always. And there was also, again, speaking as a very local, there have been some huge fights between what people who have been running the parks have wanted versus what the rest of Disney has wanted and
Yes.
versus what park attendees have wanted. So the Bob that was in between Bob Iger's departure and was maybe not one of the more popular people locally. He made a lot of changes that were not popular amongst tourists, amongst other people, got in different fights. But then a portion of Disney said, "Hey, let's make him the CEO," and
Yeah.
that went poorly.
Yeah,
So
folks who don't know about this, the kind of film creative side was a little more Iger's focus, but but also the kind of mergers and acquisitions piece he was really into. And one of the things that he made sure, happened was ESPN. And ESPN brings in more revenue for Disney than anything else, which you wouldn't think. You're like, wait, I just saw this movie was a huge blockbuster. They've got Star Wars, they've got the Marvel movies. ESPN brings in more. And then when you step back from it, you realize why. The only places where we still watch commercials in our lives now are live sporting events. And so the
yes,
ad revenue from ESPN is incredible. And so because of that, Iger was able to give some people some kind of creative freedom because he was like, it's okay, we're going to have the money. We've got ESPN revenue. And then the company went public. Stock price isn't great. And so, because of this internal battle, the guy they got as CEO, whose name I'm blanking on, came out of the
it was
park
also
side.
Bob.
Was it another
Yeah,
Bob?
he came from the parks, and many of us felt he had not done a great job with the parks.
Yeah,
And there's some revenue data to back. This is not just a, oh, we're mad because he changed the coffee. I mean, he did, but that's not the big problem here. There were a number of issues that came up where the Disney park experience was less pleasant because of things he was doing with the Disney app, with the things he was doing with
mm,
how to wait in lines, with the restaurant reservations, just whole sorts of things. And he also had no background in the creative side, which is
right.
really where how Disney gets people to come to the parks
Yeah,
and to their cruise ships. And he was not a particularly effective CEO, so they brought Bob Iger back. He wants to leave, so he keeps saying,
right.
but they have not really found a good replacement for him. And I think that is because there is that tension in Disney, and you can see it in terms of which section of Disney are you talking to.
Yeah.
My sense is that the film and television side will continue to push these themes of resistance because I don't think there's two things. One is it's popular, it
It
sells.
makes
People are
money.
watching Andor,
As long as it makes money, they'll say, okay,
makes
well,
money.
we'll be hands off if you continue to bring in the profits.
I also don't think that Disney executives particularly appreciate being told by any government what to do.
Yes.
They've tangled with DeSantis and our governor of Florida. They've tangled with, they do this on all levels. They've had a continuous fight with local county officials and local city
Hmm.
officials. I know that they are not necessarily openly speaking out. And there are ways where ABC television in particular is perhaps not being as, how do I phrase this, accurate in calling out Trump
Yeah.
administration issues as I personally would like. I feel that, there are things ABC could be doing that they are not doing. So I don't want to go, yay, Disney leading
Right.
the resistance, because they obviously are not doing that. But at the same time, I think in their pop culture, they're going to continue to do that resistance and rebellion. And it's a very historical trait.
Right.
I've studied a lot of fairy tales. And one of the amazing things were all of the aristocrats at the court of Louis XIV who couldn't say anything about Louis XIV publicly, but they could point out, oh, well, this is what happens when a king is given his way all the time. This is what happens when,
Uh-huh.
and they did it in their fairy tales. They said, okay, this is what happens when a woman is forced to choose between her children and her job. This is and they had a lot going on in those stories because they couldn't speak out.
Uh-huh. Yes. I mean, I do think storytellers are going to be incredibly important. And the kind of storytelling that we do that is not as dependent on the kind of corporate machine. I mean, there certainly always will be the giant corporations that are involved in the pipeline. If Amazon decided that everything that I write is going to be totally inaccessible, it would
Mhm.
make it very hard to get my work to people. But I am too small for them to care, right? And so the storytellers like us are going to be able to write that poem that says, "Hey, the emperor has no clothes," right? And
Mhm.
whether or not a company like Disney decides to engage in that, I think is going to be this is an example of the people are going to create the conditions. We're going to make Disney a part of the resistance, not the other way around. They're not
Right.
leading; they're following our purchasing, and this was something I've been telling folks about. The Democratic Party. The Democratic Party will not save you. You need to save the Democratic Party. Push them to be involved in the resistance. But yeah, I think Disney is the same way. Make them
Mhm.
a resistance organization. They're not going to do it for values. They're going to do it for value.
I mean, the entire reason why Disney parks in their one, like, let's be nonconformist or whatever, got extremely pro-queer, pro-rainbow and whatever was because gay days started happening at Disney, which Disney never had any official involvement in, despite people, oh, Disney, you're letting gay days
Right.
happen. Disney's like, we're letting people buy tickets. I mean,
Yeah.
I was around for the start of gay days. Trust me, the Disney was not excited about this.
Yeah.
But people came in, they said, oh, wow, this is a off weekend for us, and yet we are filling the parks. Let's start
Hmm.
selling a few rainbow things. Oh, these are selling. Let's go
Yes.
further. And all of a sudden you have this very rainbow friendly Disney where and you can buy, I don't have them in this room, but I have like little rainbow Mickey wine stopper. I
Yeah.
have a rainbow, this dumb things like this because I wanted to encourage them. I said, okay, so I'm going to
Yeah.
buy your rainbow Star Wars products. I'm going to buy your little bottle stop. I needed one anyway. It was cute. It was $5. So yes.
Yeah.
So
But
that
we are
was how
driving them.
but
That's
we drove
exactly
them
it.
and
Yep.
they are still, and as a result, Disney said, yes, we'll tangle with DeSantis on this question because this makes money for us. People come
Uh-huh.
in and they buy our stuff. It is not that I think that anybody in Disney cast members, yes, but Disney executives, the ones I've met, I honestly don't think that they have any actual interest
No.
in in human rights in general, let alone human rights for a minority. It's not on their radar at all. But if they can make money at it, hey, they go. And then suddenly we have, oh, kids can come to the park and they see rainbow clothing and non-binary clothing and trans clothing, and they're told, yes, you can be trans, this is great, we love you, please spend money.
Yes.
And I think that that is something we can do.
Yeah.
And in turn, some of that, like I know Disney cast members who have spent money on Neon Hemlock.
Yeah.
Which is a little, so hey, this is I obviously Neon Hemlock is a little exciting queer press that I love and I'm very excited about.
And
They're
has a
not,
nebula. I voted for a book, a novella that was put out by Neon Hemlock for the nebulas last night. Like Neon Hemlock is doing really well. It's been very exciting to see. As somebody who owns a small press, I've been very excited for Neon Hemlock. They're like a
I've
template. Like I want to be like Neon Hemlock. They're very cool.
I mean, yes, Neon Hemlock has published me, so let's,
Yeah.
get that out of the way first. I have also hung out with Dave at ICFA on occasions and had drinks with him. So obviously I am incredibly biased. With that said, the novella line they're doing is
Yeah.
I- I'm just it's a I have not liked every single one, but I
Sure.
have been impressed by every single one. And the other thing that I really love about Neon Hemlock is in some ways is diversity an overused word in the context I'm using it? Yes, but really you have a huge range.
Yeah.
They're doing space opera, they're doing a meditation on death, they're doing spy work, they're doing, so you never know what you're going to get in this book. And it's just so exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm very enthusiastic about that press and other, small presses as well.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, this is exciting to me. We have been doing as a mechanism to keep bringing people back to the show, we have a running story that we've been telling. It's called The Side Quest. And this is a story set in the universe of the novel that I'm writing, but far, far away. It's this totally independent story. And so it's been kind of a way for me with other authors to explore this universe. And I won't do the whole backstory for all the folks who are regular viewers of the show, but where we left off, we have our 11-year-old protagonist, Zill, and Zill has snuck away from her home, where she was left in the care of a neighbor lady, and who she found boring. She didn't want to be there anymore, so she snuck away and she snuck into a market cart with a non-binary character, a Zaman named Jesmar. And Zill and Jesmar then rescued this inventor who was going to be beaten up by a mob because he'd made this lantern that could theoretically ward off the terrors that come at night. Only he knows that Banel is the character's name, and Banel knows it's a prototype. It doesn't work anyway. Then they were on their way out of town and they were confronted by this kind of competing inventor, and they've only got this one working, or this one prototype lantern, which only Banel knows doesn't work anyway. And they're going to be stuck out at night. And Wellfill, this other character, we're going to name him Wellfill after. I'm hybridizing the names of all the people I have on the show and making the names for these fantasy characters. So Rebecca Wells Phillips will name Wellfill after her. And so Wellfill shows up and demands the lantern back. And the four of them, over the last couple of entries, have agreed to travel together for the night because they can't be, nobody on their own would be safe. And where we left off last week, they agreed to kind of stay the night together because Zill, cleverly, to prevent everyone from fighting, while they're all arguing, hides the lantern. And she knows where it is, but they don't know where it is. And so there is no opportunity to debate the lantern. And to her surprise, Banel's kind of like, okay, that's fine. Well, we understand as readers, that's because Banel knows the lantern wouldn't have worked anyway. So they're using the traditional method, which is to have a big fire if you're out at night, and the terrors who are afraid of light won't be able to, attack them theoretically. Only now they've got two carts. So they've got Jesmar's market cart. Jesmar sells the kind of goods that are used to make other things. And then Wellfill's cart. You have no idea what's in Wellfill's cart. And those are on either side of the fire. And our characters are around the fire. But because of those placements of those carts, there are two shadowy areas. And where we left off last week, there is some creepy sounds in the shadows. And so we don't know what's in that space, but we know people try not to be out at night because of it's not, the terrorists don't come out every night, but you never know, right? And so that's where we've left off. We have four characters around a fire, and there are sounds in the shadows beyond the fire ring. What happens next?
I mean, I would like to say that everybody starts singing, but I don't. Just because, hey, this is a way to, let's try to distract the sounds. Let's get the sounds done, and see what happens when they start.
I love this. Who starts them singing? Because I think that says a lot about the character. Who would get them going?
It's not the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the kid's gonna be scared. But I think one of the older adults, and it would not be the one you would think either.
Yes.
Not the inventor. One of the other two starts singing. Starts with humming, starts whatever. You have a whole bunch of songs because that way you cannot hear the sounds. And then they also get into a fight of, well, are we attracting attention by singing? But at the
Yeah.
same time, you're calming the kid.
Yeah.
You're getting, I'm hoping you're calming the kid. We can't hear the shadows.
Yeah.
You're
Uh,
singing.
so so the other two characters are Jesmar, the Zaman who took this stowaway, essentially, found Zill in their cart and accepted them along the way. And then the other is Wellfill, who is this person who confronted them on the road and said, "Look, I'm willing to fight with you to get this lantern back," and they were like, "But we don't want to fight with you. We'll die." Who would be the one who starts them? Because I think either way, that's going to be really interesting.
Either way, it's interesting because you have, yeah, now Wilful would probably know something.
Yeah. So I
And
love this.
so
So
Wilful
wealth
would know
and
if this is effective.
right and Wellfill, up until now, the reader could be under the impression that this character is a villain, right? They show up on the road
Right.
and they're like, "Give me this back." And now this character, and I haven't decided on a gender for Wellfill. I don't think we ever presented that. So this world has four genders. There are Haman, equivalent to men, Haman, women, Zaman, who are ace and go for like a very gender neutral presentation, and then Timon, who go for like a are bi and go for like a very hypersexualized. And one of the things I'm exploring in my book is even with four genders, people still get forced into ruts that they are not comfortable with. Wellfill. So Banel is Haman. Zill is 11 years old, but already thinks, expects that she will grow up to be a woman. Jesmar, who is Zaman. And what about Wellfill? So Wellfill be another Haman, a man, uh, or Zaman, or we don't have a Timon character.
I mean, in a way, if you make him, or I just used him, so that's
Right.
perhaps not the correct pronoun to be using here, but if you make that character, in a way, it's kind of too neat to have everybody to
One
have
of each.
one
Yeah.
of each. As much as I really like the idea of having the bi representation there, but that's also me being looking for bi representation
Right.
and pan
Don't worry,
representation.
there are
So,
lots of great Timon characters in the novel itself. One of the
okay,
protagonists is a Timon in the novel, and I'm using Tay Tur, so it's just our pronouns but with a T, so hopefully the reader will be able to get those. And Tay is one of the best characters in the whole thing. So yeah, there will be plenty of bi representation. But yeah, I think having Wellfield be Haman, be
mhm.
a man, then kind of we've got these two male competing characters, and so Wellfield as a Haman, he shows up demanding his and what I'm trying to remember which of my interviewees it was who came up with this idea, but what he is demanding is a part of the lantern, which he claims Banel stole, and the whole thing won't work without this. But it wouldn't work for him either. It would just be a piece, right? And Banel believes that with this lantern, he can create a lantern that can ward off the terrors at night. So Wellfield, I could imagine, would easily present as, a villain. Here's this person who shows up. But this could be a neat pivot. He starts them singing. And who's for the idea of singing and who's saying, shh, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet.
I think the other two adults are initially be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. And he's like, no, this will work. And one of the reasons he wants the lantern, though, is of course, it's only a temporary solution. You can
Right.
only sing for so long before your voice runs out. So he knows he's got this, which means he knows that these shadows can be maybe not defeated, but resisted. They can be pushed off,
Yeah.
but it's temporary.
Right. And they need to sleep
And
for the night. They
and
can
they need to
that's
sleep and they can't sleep when somebody's singing. And yeah, and they're going to have to try to take turns the way they would take turns with watching, but of course not everybody's enthusiastic and somebody there has got to have no sense of pitch, so they start
yeah.
singing and it's not really singing. So it's like,
Yes.
okay, that does not count. No, we're not. You have to shut up. You could sleep for the night. So but that's also why that person never tried singing.
Right. Well, and I love the idea that of the four, Wellfill's the one who says, "Trust me, this works," and then the one
Hmm.
who says, "I'm willing to try it," is Zill, the child,
Hmm.
who's like, I wouldn't have done this, and if I had, people would have shouted me down. But there is an adult who is telling me here this might work, and she then engages. And then Jesmar and Bano kind of reluctantly, oh, fine, I guess we're doing this thing. We're singing along. And once they all start singing, what happens to the sounds in the darkness?
They actually do seem to retreat. So
And
it
do they do
works.
so
They don't,
noisily, or are the characters aware, like they've left, or are they going, wait, we got to listen because maybe they've left because you can't
they have
listen
to
and
wait.
sing.
They have to wait and listen. And then
Yeah,
they realize, oh, it is a little bit further away. So it is sort of working. But then as they wait, they can hear the noises coming closer again.
yeah,
So they have to get back to singing. And the singing is also a problem because nobody has the same lyrics.
yeah.
Nobody, uh, this is not a group of people who have been trained to sing the same songs. Nobody can sing harmony. As I said, one person there cannot sing. So this is not a wow, this immediately works and this is a beautiful melody. And of course, you have the sleeping problems, you have the energy
Right,
problems, you have the, oh, we cannot sing a body song in front of the kid problem.
right. Oh,
Like,
yes.
so yeah, I know this song, but it is incredibly inappropriate. So I cannot, this is a great song, roll your leg over, it would totally work, but not in front of the kid.
Well, and maybe that's a good place for us to leave off is once Zill falls asleep, then the adults start singing bawdy songs and
Yes,
start to make a connection among them. Here's a song I couldn't sing while Zill was still awake.
yes,
And that gets them through till dawn. And so now we've got three adults who did not sleep the night, one kid who got to sleep through all the body music, but they made that opportunity. And the next morning they wake up, and Jesmar and Banel have learned something. You can keep them at bay by having a combination of the light and singing your way through
singing,
the night.
yes.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so we will leave off. The sun has come up, and we have three very exhausted people who sang the night through. And next week we'll figure out what they do next. That's excellent. Okay, well, let's go to our commercial break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you what you've been daydreaming about lately. Hey, readers and reviewers. I want to put out an all call for guests who are fighting back against fascism. If you know an author or artist of any kind who is using their art or their platform to push back, especially if they are doing so in an interesting way that deserves more attention and support, share this show with them and encourage them to email NotAPipePublishing at NotAPipePublishing@gmail.com, and we'll get them scheduled. And if you're looking for inspiring or practical ways you can push back, be sure to subscribe to the show so you catch all the great guests folks are going to recommend. See you here each week. Fascist purges always begin with books. If you can't imagine a better future, you'll never fight for one.
At a time when oligarchs and politicians are trying to divide us, to scare us, to silence us, it's more important than ever to speak up, even when it sometimes feels like screaming into the void.
Celebrations of established foundations all of a sudden screeching, discordant, as the preachers become ignored by the God they adore, pathetic and
anti-fascist literature is
and the
one way
mumbling
we
their
fight
last
back against the
years.
rising tide of hatred and ignorance that seeks to drown the sparks of empathy, community, and curiosity that are the birthright of all human beings.
And then maybe you understand. Never let them silence your voice. Never let them push you down. And never forget that your mommy loves you with every
Through our
fiber.
stories and poems, we articulate our love for each other, our desire for justice, our need for freedom, and our determination to make a stand.
The seductive depths of the ocean are more appealing than physical contact with either of them. A mental stream of David Attenborough narration carries her through the awkwardness. Here, the larger of the two apex
Volume 1,
predators
the
demonstrates
Antifa Lit Journal, begins with Rachel A. Rosen's brilliant What If We Kissed While Sinking a Billionaire's Yacht, and takes the reader on a journey through rage, fear, and despair to a place of grace, hope, and motivation.
Fascists are like bindweed and blackberry in the garden. You can't eradicate them, but if you stay on top of your reading, you can keep them from taking over.
By itself, it's not enough, but no single effort is. We must come together and embrace one another.
Media. The Enriquez kids came to my daycare until their dad got disappeared, Dolores said. Where were the signs and the singing when my brother died?
Protest, boycott, strike, demand your representatives do more, protect the vulnerable, and support the people who are fighting alongside you through their
The
art.
kind who sits comfortably where evil meets idiocy and drinks up what he's fed through tubes painted red like the doors of those they tell us are better off dead.
back our Kickstarter, and help us make the Antifa Lit Journal into the kind of community that will outlast the current fascist regime. Fight fascism with your voice while you still can.
You deserve a vacation.
How about a trip to a dude ranch on a colony planet?
Or a journey to a universe where wizards call lightning down from the sky and calm rumbling volcanoes?
Or a holiday tour of the major cities of Europe with vampires and werewolves and witches as guides.
Or maybe just a nice hot sudsy bath with a book of poetry that will make you cry and sigh and laugh.
We've got you covered.
A paperback will appear on your doorstep each month to whisk you away, and you'll return refreshed, enlightened, and ready to make the world we share a brighter place for everyone.
Or if you prefer, you can sign up for a quarterly subscription and get 4 YA titles, 4 adult titles, or 4 collections of poetry per year.
Plus, you'll get book club questions from the author before you start the book, and an interview with the author afterwards.
So, if you are in a book group or want to start one, this is everything you need in a kit. Will we occasionally throw in some extra surprises just to say thank you to our members? Of course.
You can also give someone their very own membership with all of the rights and privileges pertaining thereto.
So, find a reward level that's right for you.
And share this with your friends.
Join the Indulge Your Shelf book club today. Your bookshelves deserve a little pampering.
In terms of daydreaming, honestly, currently I am sort of daydreaming of having enough money to travel extensively again. I grew up traveling. I spent most of my life traveling, and now between health concerns and other concerns, I just am not able to do it as much. So I freely admit I have had some daydreams about winning the lottery, which would work better if I actually played the lottery.
Right. Where would you travel to?
There is a wonderful boat trip that starts in South Africa and goes all the way up to Morocco. I would like to do that. This would be very physically difficult for a lot of reasons, but I would like to try to get to Antarctica. I have not been to China. Every time I try to get to China, something freaking happens. So I'm not sure that China wants me to try to come to them. This has been now decades where it's like, yes, I'm coming. No, I'm not, because often it is something in China, Tiananmen Square, COVID. This has just not gone well, but I really would love to see China. I would like to spend, at least a month there going around because there's just so much to see. And while we're daydreaming, I would like a certain leader of Russia to leave so I can go back to Russia.
Yes, I would love. There are places in Russia I would love to see, but not under Putin. And so I'm waiting on. Yes, the regime change so I can go. So when did you get to go?
I went in right after the Helsinki Worldcon. I took the ferry because you don't need a visa. You can only stay a couple of days, but you can take the ferry, or at the time, I understand it's no longer working, but at the time you could get on a ferry at Helsinki, go over to St. Petersburg, spend a couple of days. And the main things I got out of this were when people were telling me Russia was wheelchair unfriendly, wow, were they understating the situation?
Really?
But I was prepared. I know, but I knew it was going to be bad. So I was like, okay, yes, this is extremely bad. 2, when you show up to a wheelchair at the Tsar's palace, they're not very excited about this. They're like, but you're going to be on our beautiful floors, and like, yes. So they are going to force you to transfer wheelchairs. It's going to be extremely exciting. This was much more dramatic than I thought. But the other thing is, there is so much to see. I saw maybe 10% of what I wanted to see. And yes, partly this was because when I went into the Hermitage Museum, I know you're supposed to go around and look at the Hermitage Museum, and that is good advice. But if you're me, you keep stopping. So you just keep. So I did see a little bit of the Hermitage Museum. I did not see most of it at that place. I mean, granted, that's a huge museum, but I just kept getting, oh, look at this. And then, 2 hours would go by and I'm like, oh, I've missed most of the
Yeah.
Hermitage Museum. So I need to go back because I would like to actually see it, if I can. Obviously, we have just demonstrated I'm not very good at actually going through a Hermitage Museum, but I would love to.
Yeah. Next time,
And I want
plan
to
a
see that
week,
next time.
Yes.
But yeah, Putin needs to leave
Right.
because this is not the most important reason, but
Yeah.
I want to go back to Russia.
Yeah.
And also, thanks to him, I didn't spend all my rubles, so I just thought, okay, I'll hang on to them. And now they have no value whatsoever. So
Uh-huh.
again, this is the pettiest, stupidest reason for being annoyed at Putin, but
But
go away,
it all adds
get out
up.
of
Go away.
Ukraine,
Yes.
stop killing people. We'd all be happier.
Yes.
Anyway, first of all. So yes, I
Well,
am daydreaming.
I totally agree. If you can do your trip from South Africa to Morocco, you'll be very close to where I am. I now live here in Spain, and then we can go up to St.
Ooh,
Petersburg. That would be. I would love to see St. Petersburg post Putin. So we will hope for that.
I would, well, Spain is one of the other countries I do want to get back to. I've traveled extensively in Spain and I speak enough Spanish to get by. My Spanish is not fluent, but I can get by. And I definitely, yes.
Yes, well, in this city, considering its age, is very wheelchair accessible. Like they have been very thoughtful about, we'll go to parks. Although yesterday we were at a park and the angle of the ramp on this one particular hike, I was like, somebody was trying there, but that's not realistic. There's no way. Uh, but by and large, I think it would be a really wheelchair accessible city, and yeah, so much to see.
And
You'll
as
love it.
and when on my previous trips to Spain, people have been very kind about my accent, and
Hmm.
if I can't remember a
Oh,
word, as I said, I can get by. I would like to be more fluent, but I can get by.
yeah, no, I've been to countries where the folks, by and large in here in Western Europe anyway, speak English also, and they will get irritated and just switch. And here I've been, most of the people will let you try. And yes, they're very encouraging. There's just a kind of culture of kindness here in Barcelona. Now I say that, I also have to bear in mind as a cishet middle-aged white man, I have experienced kindness. I know it is not a kind place to everyone, but yes, people have been very kind to us here, so it's been very cool.
And when I took the road to Compostela years back, actually, most of my conversations were in Spanish because
Yeah.
in that particular area in Madrid, everybody spoke English and didn't want to hear my Spanish. I agree with you there. Madrid was not enthusiastic to be very, I admittedly, I guess, overstating. I'm sure there are people in Madrid that would have been kinder, but the ones I spoke to were like,
Yeah.
Americans, don't destroy my language like this. And your accent is at best Mexican, and even then, we don't want to
Right,
insult
right.
Mexico. Um, but in that part of northern Spain, that was actually very much Spanish, and I was pretty pleased that I could
Yeah,
get through without. There were some issues, but because there were words I didn't know, and the pronunciation there is obviously a little bit different than the
right.
Telemundo
Well,
when
and
I
I
was
wonder
young.
if the
But
reason people are so kind about it here in Barcelona, I mean, partly we have a lot of, expats, but also there's a tension between Catalan and Castellano, the Spanish
mm,
and Catalan languages. And so everyone is learning. And so there's this kind of generosity about, oh, right now you're trying your Castellano rather than your Catalan. And I would really like to learn Catalan if we get to stay. We're hoping to be able to stay here permanently, and I would love to then learn Catalan, so I would have both. That would be really cool.
yeah, Catalan I don't speak at all, and French, the entire country of France would prefer that I not mangle their language
Uh-huh,
further than.
yes, that's been my experience in
But
France is they're like, please don't try, you're hurting our ears.
yeah, with Spain and Italy, my major problem is I learned Italian first, and the languages are not that different. So there are occasions where the Italian word will come out
Yes,
when I'm trying to speak Spanish, and alternatively, when I'm speaking Spanish, there are times when the Italian word will come out, and that felt even more so in Europe than Here in Florida, yeah, there's a lot of people that speak Spanish, but they're not speaking Italian, so they're not
Right.
going to respond to me in Italian. Whereas
Right.
if I start this in Spain, suddenly we can switch over. And this has happened in Europe, where I'll start where assuming I'm speaking in Spanish, and in fact it's actually Italian. And if I'm
Yeah.
not really focused, or I'll throw in like Italian has some additional words that you throw in that Spanish doesn't. Spanish has some phrases that Italian never uses, and so there'll
Yeah.
be some confusion there.
Yeah, I know that's going to be a challenge for me with Catalan too, because they're close enough that I'll just go, oh, I'm switching. Well, I'll need to
And
stay in a, you know.
I'm definitely not. And of course, I'm also the person that, because of severe jet lag at Paris once, I thought I was having a conversation in French and it was actually in Spanish.
Yes.
That can also show
Oh, yes.
I mean, it was an actual conversation. I'm like, wow, my French has massively improved. I'm very surprised I'm this. And then this is not French. That is why
Uh-huh.
I am having this
Yep.
conversation.
I am
So,
more comfortable apparently. Yes. Yeah. That exhaustion is a real factor. That's for sure. Um, so where can folks find you online if they are interested in checking out your work?
right now, I am on Blue Sky at Mari Ness without any like spaces or anything like that. I have a WordPress blog that I remember to update when I have news. It's not very interesting other than that. I'm also on Medium, and that is reprints. Mostly, every once in a while, I'll throw on an original, but mostly I'm trying to put all my reprints up on Medium because they keep vanishing from other places.
Right. Right. Yeah.
This
That's a good
is,
idea. I should do some of that myself. That's smart.
yeah, I don't, I mention this not because I expect anybody to start following me on Medium, or, it's not a site. I know Medium claims you can earn money there. I've never spoken to like real writers that earn money there, but it is a useful site, I think, for reprints. It is a
Yeah.
useful site for storing some stuff like that, and I found it very useful there. And I do get some reader feedback, so it's pretty cool. I like that. And then I have a very small Patreon that I do not do enough with. That is why it remains small. If I did a little bit more with it this month, but still not that much. So I have some unpaid people, some paid people, but it's very small. If you want to check it out, great. But be aware that I have locked most of the content on Patreon. I have not done that on Medium because Patreon has some original stuff. Medium is all reprints.
Yeah. Yeah. So who would you suggest I have? Oh, no, I wanted to ask you before I get to that. What is in your to read pile that you're looking forward to checking out soon?
Ooh, well, the big one is Laura Donnelly has a new novella out from Hemlock Press, which I have not read.
Mm.
So I'm hopeful. Then I have, this is totally non-genre, but Tom Levinson at MIT does a lot of history of science books,
Mm.
and he just has a new one out. And you know what? I had this written down so that I could tell you about it, and I have let me get it's about the history of, come on, computer. Levin. I need to replace this laptop, very obviously. Apologies about that.
That's okay. I can clip this.
Yeah, this is, and now the initial things I'm getting is the wrong thing, but anyway, it is another book of history from science history from him. What I found with him, and his webpage is claiming that his new, I hope, yeah, if you want to edit this out, that's great. I'm so sorry.
I butchered the question itself. So let me start over and let's just do the Laura Donnelly, because that one I can see you've already got notes for that one, and then Jose Iriartes and Usman Malik's. So um before I let you escape,
Okay,
what is in your
I have the book now.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So
Okay.
we can so I'm very excited about Laura Donnelly, who has got a novella coming out from Neon Hemlock, or I guess it just came out. I have not had a chance to read it, but I love all of her stuff.
Mm.
She has an amazing take on queerness and alternate history. Highly recommend her previous books. probably shouldn't recommend this novella yet because I haven't read it, but I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
And then the other book, this is a bit different. This is from Tom Levinson, who is a professor at MIT, and he does history of science books. The latest book that came out literally just yesterday is So Very Small, and it's on germ theory. And what I
Oh.
like about Levinson's books is it's not just that they can be very topical, but they bring up things that I feel need to be thought of in world building.
Mhm.
So his book, Money for Nothing, for example, was discussing a lot of the ways an economy works and how a shift in mathematical thinking shifts your economy.
Yeah.
And this is stuff I feel can be applied to world building, where, hey, a shift here affects this. Now, I don't know if
Absolutely.
that's going to come out with the germ theory book or not, but that is hopefully coming from the library very soon. So that's my other book that I'm pretty enthusiastic about.
Oh, I love that idea. And one of the things I have found is even if it never becomes explicit in the text, thinking about the way the economy works, thinking about the way the history of the culture might have been affected by germs, for example,
Yes.
gives you as an author a way more grounded and richer understanding of that world. I remember reading a book by a friend of mine where he was really fascinated by international kind of mercantile economics in this nautical world. And his story ended up being a seafaring kind of fantasy. But because he'd thought so deeply about why these ships would have been traveling from this place to this place to market these goods, it felt very believable.
Yeah, this is I've gotten a lot of thinking from Tom, and I say Tom, I mean we've followed each other on social media. I've never met him. I don't think he knows who I am. But he does have a lot to say about on his own social media. He is very much anti-Trump at the moment. So he has but he will put in a lot of what's happening into a historical context, which I find very useful.
Yeah.
So also somebody to follow on that way. So yes, straight white guy. So there is that, but at the same time, there's some very interesting cultural work that I found very useful for my own writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. It sounds like a good follow. So, speaking of, who would be a good guest to have on this show? Who would you recommend?
There's just so many. These are so I just went with personal friends and also somebody who I from the Central Florida area who I kind of know I wouldn't necessarily call a close friend because we've just met a few times. Owl Going Back, who is written a lot of fascinating work from a Native American perspective, mostly in horror, but he's done some other stuff. He'd be fascinating
Yeah.
because he can just talk for hours. Uh, and he has a outstanding perspective on history. Joe Ariade is also a friend from the local Central Florida area, non-binary. They have done a number of award-nominated works, working in middle grade, and where I think they have an interesting perspective is as someone working within the Florida educational system, but also working as a visible non-binary author and also a Cuban non-binary author, and the I should say the how we're working, how he's works through that.
Yeah.
But also has some great comfort reads, and so I recommend Joe's work for that. And then Joe's spouse, El Air does a lot of very queer centric work. It's really sapphic fiction. And what I find interesting about her from a point of view of your show is Elle's been doing this for years, since the 90s, and it took her forever to break out. But she's continuing to work in an area of queer writing and specifically sapphic writing that is maybe not 100% meshed with the expectations of sapphic writing.
Yeah.
And I love this because she does deal with some issues of non-consent. She does deal with some issues of medical trauma within a particular relationship. She does deal with a lot, and her books, they're horrible. She's going to get mad at me for saying this, but I'm extremely frustrated with what has happened with her career, to be honest, because she's marketed terribly. She keeps getting marketed as a romance author. And yes, all of her books have romances. I'm not saying they don't, but that's not what they are. And
Right.
particularly the series of hers that I liked the best, and now I'm blanking on it, but there's more going on, and yet she gets pigeonholed into doing romance, and I feel also has been encouraged to focus more on the romance more than the other stuff she's doing.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear her rebuke me and say, no, Mari
Right.
doesn't know what she's talking about. This is my perspective. But that's how I look at her as an author who I think also should be doing better, honestly.
Yeah.
Should be doing financially much better. But again, I'm a friend, so that was extremely biased, but my opinion.
Yeah, but somebody, folks right away check out El Ira's work, and that way if we can get her on the show, you will be informed about that. But yeah, somebody worth supporting. So, oh, excellent. Well,
Threadbare is the book. Threadbare is the book I would recommend
Threadbare.
starting with.
Okay.
And
Okay. Yeah,
and one more
that's
quick recommendation from a Central Florida friend is Usman Malik, who has an extensive amount. He's a Pakistani United States writer, doctor, primarily horror. Has been working primarily in short fiction, but does have a novel coming out,
that's
which he's
exciting.
currently going through the revisions on.
Yeah.
So once those pop out, that'll be from Penguin Random House, I believe, next year.
Oh, very cool. Okay, good. Well, before we get to our send-off, I do have to thank some folks. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to the author Stephen E. Scribner, who is the author of the Taunt Fantasy series, but also makes music under the name S. Eric Scribner for his song A Poem from the album Pianosphere. We used that during the ad break. If you make music, you'd like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's or Steven's song, so email me about that. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making this show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. I'm always appreciative. Thank you, Doug. And I cannot forget to mention Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipePublishing. So please go to NotAPipePublishing.com, check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. And if you like this show, rate it and review it wherever you found it. Check out Mari's newest, well, actually, where can folks find your Hugo-nominated poem?
Haven Spec is the name of the zine. They're a relatively new zine, which is also why we were all kind of taken aback by my nomination, because we kind of figured the nominations would be going to Just Strange Horizons, Uncanny, and then here Haven Spec popped up. It's like, this is great. They are a professional paying magazine. They deserve your support. They've published all kinds of other amazing authors. So
yeah.
definitely.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. So everybody check that out and support the authors who are doing the work that you appreciate these days, because there are a lot of folks who need your encouragement. Similarly for the show, if you could click on that thumbs up, we'd appreciate that as well. And Mari and I want you to remember a couple of things as you're going into your week. So I've been telling everybody, please remember all writing is political. Speaking is political. Choosing not to write or speak is also political, because silence maintains the status quo. So please use your voice to make the world a better place. Mari, how about you? What's your advice for everyone going into their week?
Cats are still cool and they need to be fed. So that's actually from the creature here who has pointed out that his food bowl is empty and has been a little bit too excited.
little impatient.
On that similar note, and this is something that, as someone with ongoing depression and anxiety, this is very hard for me to remember. So this is more of self-note along with the general note. There are good things out there. There are trees, there are birds, there's poetry, there's music. And I don't want us to lose touch with all of that. I want us to remember when my great-grandmother fled Germany. She looked at mountains on the train as she was leaving. and was like, okay, there are mountains. It's going to take me, having to take this really weird journey out of Germany, but she had mountains to look at. And I know that sounds like a cliche, and I know from my own experience it'd be very hard to remember. I'm not saying that this is a cure-all, but there's music, there's song, there's birds, there's beaches, there's oceans, there's things.
Yeah. Here's a tiny bit of our bonus segment, just for supporters of the Patreon.
Yes, I've run into that a lot, and it's amplified because one of the places where I did live longer than other sections was South Florida, where not only was I moving around in South Florida, but South Florida is very culturally distinct from the rest of the United States, very much so, particularly in Miami. And until you have spent time in Miami and then you go to the rest of the country, you don't realize Miami is essentially Caribbean, South American. It is not culturally U.S. Broward, on the other hand, where I was living, which is next to Miami, isn't really, often does not feel culturally anything because it's extremely transient. So you say, I'm from Broward County. Well, everybody's moving in and out of Broward. There's all kinds of different, like huge numbers of ethnicities, huge numbers of people, but almost nobody in Broward was born in Broward.
Right. It doesn't have the deep Broward culture.
And they don't stay.
Yeah.
Nobody comes, or I shouldn't say nobody, but very, very few people arrive in the Fort Lauderdale, Broward area intending to live the rest of their lives there. So you have those cultural tensions, but you also have this doesn't really feel like anybody's home.
Yeah.
And there are some people in Fort Lauderdale that have made it their home. There are, it's some, but it felt like the people I was interacting with were all, yeah, I'm going to leave. Yeah, I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I just arrived. Or, yeah. And there wasn't a sense of this is where we're staying. Central Florida is different because this does feel a lot more U.S. Yes, there's a lot of cultural, my next door neighbors on either side do not speak English. So this is how I practice my Spanish. There's an awful lot of Brazilians. There's other cultures here. So it's not, particularly culturally uniform, but it's not quite as different and as not feeling that this is a place you're from as South Florida was in many ways.
Yeah. And how is that manifested in your life in terms of, there's the trade-offs of knowing so much more of the world and also not having a deep sense of place. How has that played out in your life and into your work?
Into my work, that one of the problems is there's a big thing of, write what you are. Don't go outside of your cultural identity. And it's like, well, I don't have one.
Yeah.
And when I initially started writing, I was writing stuff inspired by Japan and was told, well, you shouldn't be doing that because you're not Japanese, which is true. I don't dispute that point, but it was like, yeah, but I don't necessarily feel all that American either. I feel culturally, we spent a lot of time in Italy, and my Italian is no longer fluent, but that felt more of my culture.
Yeah.
Having said that, I will say in terms of writing, trying to bring Northern Italian culture is not what Americans are expecting from Italy.